There are 5 parts to this activity. First of all, students discuss local issues that matter to them. Next, they will collect or find data related to the issue that they have identified. They will explore some infographics for inspiration before using their data to create their own infographic. Finally, they can submit their infographic to the Rycroft competition by the 10th of October 2025 with a chance to win a bundle of books. Selecting, representing, arguing and communicating with data are important skills for data literate citizens. Much of the data we consume are presented in the form of infographics, which can be very different from the standard graphical representations such as bar charts, scatter graphs and pie charts that students often encounter in classrooms. This activity is an opportunity for students to explore and interpret more novel data representations and apply their own creativity to create an infographic about an issue they are motivated by.
So some things to consider with Graphcraft. Firstly, what is an infographic? Well, it's a graph, chart or diagram of some kind showing data in a way that's useful. In other words, an illustration of data. And here's an example from the lovely website Information is Beautiful, looking at ideas around vaccines and autism. So this data tells a story. The more you look, the more detail you can see, but there's a clear overall message. And infographics are useful in order to tell stories with data. So here's some examples from the activity. The first one here is a nice hand-drawn infographic, and this is comparing the gender pay gap in Scotland with the gender pay gap in the UK. And you'll see there that it's been visualised on a clock face with hours of work that are fairly paid and hours of work that are not fairly paid. Here's another one. This is data to do with golden eagles in Scotland, and this one's been visualised with much more of an illustrative style, and this one's been hand painted. And then finally, a nice digital graph, in fact 2 graphs that have been stacked, which means you can compare the data over time. And this is to illustrate a really wide and diverse range of different infographics that students might draw during this activity. So it's really important to understand that students can approach this in a number of different ways, and they should be encouraged to be nice and creative. And part of that process is trialing, exploring and drafting. And so for the first infographic that you saw previously that was to do with the gender pay gap, here's some examples of the type of trialing and drafting that students might do. They might try different ways of presenting the same data. So in this case, we've got a kind of bar graph, which is illustrated with humans. We've got a kind of pictogram, which is illustrated with icons suggesting money. And then we've also got the clock, and the clock was the one that was chosen here because it was most evocative for this purpose. So another thing to consider with students is thinking about submitting some graphs or infographics for the Graphcraft infographic competition. And it's really important for this competition that we're looking for infographics that show data skills from students, gorgeous design, but also social awareness. And so telling a story, but telling a meaningful, important story that matters to students. So it's really important that students for that use good quality data from reliable sources, and that data source should be obvious when you look at the infographic. The infographic should also be beautiful, clear, accessible, easy to interpret. We're also interested in exploring the idea of infographics as doing good, not harm, and this might be a new idea to you or new to your students, so it's something worth considering. The idea that infographics aren't objective or neutral or apolitical, but actually they are there to tell an important story that should be listened to, and in particular to outline the experiences of people who may have been silenced or marginalised, or new or interesting perspectives, and certainly to make sure that they don't perpetuate stereotypes. And finally, thinking about the story, thinking about an understandable, interesting story that provokes empathy in the audience. And when students submit their infographic to the competition, they'll be invited to explain the purpose, the intention of their infographic.